the art, where the artist. Are you familiar with Manovich, Lev Manovich from MIT?
Not extensively, no.
Okay. One of his lines in his book was, The Language of New Media was, we no longer may need the artist as part of the project. The artist may start the ball rolling,
Right.
and then the viewer or user, or whatever you want to call them now, continues the art. Now, Ray Johnson did this
Sure.
in the 70s and 80s with his
the man.
players. So did
Yeah.
Tom, right?
Absolutely. Brilliant.
So isn't there a relationship between the main concept of art, once you take it out of the hand and put
Sure.
it in the mind, and now just use the vehicle at hand to distribute that art?
Absolutely. And in today's world with the internet, there's nothing better than your content going viral, which it absolutely has the potential to do. And I don't think a lot of people think that much about that. That they think, well, what I'm doing is probably not important enough, or it doesn't have I don't have that type of potential to reach a million people. But the fact of the matter is, you really do, and you do probably more so than you know.
Yeah, especially if you have somebody behind you, which galleries have. They have publicists. They invite the right people. They invite the New York Times. There was a strata of the fourth estate that is being broken today, obviously, as we can see, through the diminishing sales of newspapers, magazines. So now this fourth estate, which was a criteria for who was good and who was bad, now is coming down to people, which can be dangerous. One of the main examples is reality television.
Yeah.
That's a problem. Okay, the least common denominator. So is it up to the artist and the educated artist and the artist to be as intelligent as possible? Is there more pressure on artists and us to put out quality work because there is no middleman or editor to help us?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think there's room for all of those. That's the thing. I mean, I kind of go in between this myself, where there's a part of me that wants to create high quality work and stretch the finest canvas, and then there's still a part of me that wants to work on an old cardboard box and just put that piece up on the street somewhere. So I mean, I think right now it's a good time. It's an experimental time for people to be able to think of new ways to transcend what they're doing, and know that there's going to be an audience for pretty much all of it right now. So the more open you can be and the more willing you would be to take risks, I think people are going to also notice that right now. I think that's another thing that's big time in flux.
Yeah, it's a great time in flux. It's an amazing transitional time. Installation art. I know that you're heavily involved and were. And Ray Neufeld, I don't know if I'm sure you were friendly with Ray. Installation artist, Geraldine Hanrahan. This new world, and is it appropriate and is it valid to create an installation environment within this 3D world? Does it have any validity to it, or is it just comic book?
Well, can you rephrase that again?
Okay, for example, if I go into Second Life, if I go into Strato, Maya, and I build an installation,
sure,
okay, and I ask my user to experience the installation by using an avatar and walking through the installation,
sure,
playing with, is this valid or is it bullshit? Not physically here, or does it take a new millennial viewer to appreciate that art?
Absolutely, I think that's a brilliant context. I mean, one of the main things I get back in response about my installations when I post images up on Flickr or somewhere else is that people will say, "Wow, I love it. Wish I could come and see it." I would be more than happy to accommodate, my audience or just people that have an interest in viewing installation art with the use of technology to be able to do that, Pat. I think that's a really brilliant idea. That had not even crossed my mind.
I'm not just short and fat and hairy. It becomes, if you have an installation piece, you have an avatar, you have a walk-through space. That's one way of using this. Now we also have the question, which we get back to Manovich. If you set up a Rube Goldberg machine, so to speak, in the sense of your conceptual art. You're too young. Rube Goldberg, anybody remember Mousetrap, the game? You set everything up and then you let the user play with it. So the question becomes now, is interactive art mousetrap. Okay, is it the artist sets it up and then lets the viewer play with it, and is that the artistic experience in interactive art?
Sure.
And are artists afraid of that? You know, do artists want people being the influence behind the work, or do they want to control it? You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I do. It's probably a mixture. I mean, there's probably it all depends on the context of the work. I mean, if it's going through a gallery, the fact of the matter is that that piece needs to sell itself. It needs to generate income somehow, some way. So I think, you know, the rate of how it's going to be shown and just how much interactivity is going to be allowed all depends on who's sponsoring it and who's, you know, putting up the stipend for it to happen. So I mean, there's a lot of different contexts of how. I mean, there are, you know, more nonprofit spaces that might set a lot of these things up. I mean, we see a lot of interactive installations that happen at PS1 and places like that. But I mean, I think it all depends on who's in charge of, you know, setting it up. I mean,
it's also a mindset. You know, age has an issue here. There are people that just don't understand it. So my feeling is, why don't we set up virtual galleries on the web? Why don't we charge admittance, like they do at the regular galleries or the museums? Have a three-dimensional environment world where you can see the work. If you stored in a towel in class the other night, we can now have physical sensors which put us into space.
Sure.
So why not experience that as an artist? You know, why not provide that space in your vision?
Sure.
Like Laurie Anderson did with her early pieces, such as Up at Motel.
Yeah.
Where you were involved in Peter Gabriel with Explorer and Eve, where you were involved in the environment to a limit because it was a flat space. Now, if we engage in VRML, if we engage in the environment, then is it a horror house? What is it? But Puppet Motel was a walk-through space. We touched and played and were lost and found and discovered. You know, do we need that involvement? Is the user that ambitious to experience art that way?
I would say as of right now, it's probably 50-50. You know, it's probably 50-50, depending on how much, you know, internet experience and internet and technology savvy the individual has. Will definitely play a role. I mean, there would have to be, you know, a pretty strong incentive and marketing program to back this up, to draw people to want to participate in this. Otherwise, it might feel like work. And that's where I think the biggest problem is when it comes to going to view art or interpret art, is that people feel that it's too much work for them. And it's really not the case. It's just they don't have the right, you know, tools to engage it. So I mean, if there was a way that we could, you know, map out a simulation that would, you know, induce interest, it's a fantastic idea. But I think it'd be about 50-50 in terms of how many people would kind of jump at it and how many people would be kind of skeptical and, you know.
Until the millennials caught up. Until the 15 and 14-year-olds caught up with it. My wife is 50, and Haroon Angleton, who I wish would